The immediate question is that the words proposed to be omitted stand part of the question. The member for Hunter and Chief Government Whip.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. We will have an opportunity to do so in much more detail at a later date, but I feel one can't make a contribution in this place on this day without making at least a reference to Lieutenant Marcus Case and Lance Corporal Andrew Jones, who of course both just lost their lives in Afghanistan, making them 25 and 26 amongst our casualties. Of course, many more injured, and our thoughts and prayers go out to their families, loved ones, mates and friends. And of course, again, for the record, Mr Deputy Speaker, I restate my support for our ongoing involvement in Afghanistan. It's important to our own national interest. It's dangerous and challenging work, particularly, of course, mentoring the Afghan National Army. We don't know the detail, but it seems apparent that Lance Corporal Jones lost his life at the hand of an Afghan National Army soldier. I've had my own experiences with members of the ANA, but the majority of them, Mr Deputy Speaker, I believe, there for the right reason and doing their very, very best to train themselves and to be trained to where they need to be to take care of their own security in Uruzgan province. On that point, I noted some comments by Colonel John Angevine in the Sydney Morning Herald today, which I'll have something more to say about at a later date also. But his suggestion, which he will put in a speech to the Lowy Institute tomorrow, that Australia's strategic settings are incorrect and based on the wrong premise. I disagree with Colonel Angevine. It is right for Australia to make as its first priority the defence of our continent and our areas of strategic military interest, and to do our best to be able to do so independently of any other nation state. We don't know in the future where the United States will be in global terms. We can never be certain the United States won't turn inward. We can't always be absolutely sure the US will be there for us, as confident as we can be at this point in time, and we might be talking 100 years from now, but to have the ability to establish self-reliance, we need to have continuity in our defence planning and our continuity in our investment in defence capability, continuity, of course, which would be lost if we took a different strategic setting. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, before I turn to some of the details of the budget, I want to have something to say about what is I suppose, the topic of the day, although it's competing for on many other fronts this afternoon or this evening. And that, of course, is climate change on this day of the delivery of Professor Garneau's latest report. And I just want to share a bit of a narrative to make my point, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mick is a plumber. Throughout his working week, he generates a fair bit of waste. He disposes of it at the local council-run garbage tip, where he pays around $20 a tonne. He can't simply pass the whole cost of dumping his waste onto his customers. The industry he works in is just too competitive. Peter owns and operates a factory producing chemicals. One of his biggest costs is the safe and responsible disposal of his toxic waste. Like Mick, Pete struggles to recover these costs in a competitive market. Judy and Ben both work to support their young family. Their household budget sets aside about $30 each week to cover their council rates. 10% of that cost represents the amount the local council charges to dispose of the family's waste. They have a big garden, and while Ben puts all he can into compost, he regularly takes a trailer load of waste to the council tip in his box trailer. Each time he does so, he faces a minimum fee of $15. By contrast, those who make a quid generating the electricity which powers our homes, our factories and our small businesses dispose of their waste free of charge. On a daily basis, they emit tonnes of pollution into the atmosphere. If you and I did that, Mr Deputy Speaker, we'd be fined. There are many reasons this is unacceptable. Some environmental, some of them economic. The environmental concerns are obvious, the economic less so. When we allow one set of industries to avoid some of the costs of doing business, we distort the market and disadvantage others. We also affect business investment decisions. People have asked me, Mr Deputy Speaker, how is imposing a carbon price on big business and then compensating consumers going to change consumer behaviour? Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, there are two answers to that question. First, it is not primarily consumer behaviour we are trying to change. Rather, we are mainly trying to change the behaviour of investors. At the moment, investment in renewable forms of electricity generation or less polluting forms of generation like gas is relatively expensive. One reason is coal is, of course, relatively cheap. Second, the fact that the cost of disposing the rubbish, that is, pushing pollution into the atmosphere, including carbon dioxide, is zero. This is the key distortion I referred to earlier. Making the producers of electricity pay to pump their pollution into the atmosphere will help to level the playing field. The price they charge for their product will better reflect the cost of producing it. This will make renewables more competitive and, in turn, the renewable sector will attract greater investment and therefore will grow. That is not to say we do not hope to influence consumer behaviour. Let's say a family was to receive $100 compensation for an increase of $100 in the price of their electricity bill. If that family in turn worked hard to reduce its consumption of electricity to the point that the impact of the carbon price only sent its power prices up by $80, then the family would profit to the tune of $20. This is a significant incentive, Mr Deputy Speaker, for them to embrace the cause of energy efficiency and other means of reducing their power consumption. So even if you are a climate change sceptic, Mr Deputy Speaker, you need to ask yourself two things, particularly given it will be cheaper to act now rather than later. So wouldn't it be smart to act now as a form of insurance? Second, why should Mick, Peter, Judy and Ben pay while the big polluters escape cost-free? These are important points, Mr Deputy Speaker. The debate about carbon pricing is a very, very complex one, but at the end of the day it's really simple. There is an abundance of science to suggest the climate is warming and that man is making a contribution. But again, if you only take the precautionary principle and accept that at the moment the market is distorted and we need a structural shift in our economy, then you will support some action on climate change. If you're going to support action, you would support a market-based mechanism, which of course is the cheapest and most efficient way of doing so. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, the budget. It was a good budget. I think it was an historic budget. Its key focus, of course, was getting the budget back, or the government's books back into the black after a very, very significant investment which was absolutely necessary to keep this economy, Australian economy, out of recession. It did so very, very successfully. We are the envy of the world. The second, of course, it sought to spread the dividend of the mining boom, which of course is very, very important to people in my electorate. Very, very big investment in health continues. I'm sure it's right up the top of the agenda for most Australians. And of course, very close to my heart, a big investment in employment. In other words, a big investment in assisting those in getting back into the labour market, in getting back into the workforce, both carrot and stick, as I say, a big investment in those who need a leg up to secure some involvement in the labour force, and of course appropriate changes to the transfer payment system to ensure that people who are able to work are indeed in the workforce. We can't afford to do anything but, Mr Deputy Speaker, an unemployment rate below 5% demands that every working age person in this country able to work is working. If we fail to do that, we will not only face higher rates of inflation and therefore interest rates, but we will be missing a once-in-a-generation opportunity to break the cycle of poverty and to break the cycle of unemployment. In my electorate, we have too many people on disability support pensions who I believe could be working. We have too many sole parents not working who I believe could be working. And of course, I have many young people in my electorate who are third-generation unemployed. In other words, never known either their parents or their grandparents to work. And at the same time, I have employers, particularly those in the tourism industry, the wine tourism industry, or indeed in local pubs or clubs or in other semi-skilled areas of work, who cannot get young people to fill positions. And that is something we cannot allow to continue into the future. I'm working with my local employment coordinator and other stakeholders to ensure that the initiatives in the budget are used in a way which maximises the benefits to my constituency. This, more than anything else, Mr Speaker, is about protecting the economy, and it's about the dignity of work. Mr Deputy Speaker, one of the controversies I've seen in recent times, and it's nothing new of course, is the effect on contractors when head contractors or the primes in a project collapse or are unable to pay their bills. And I've seen there have been a few examples. The building the education revolution, some members of this place have tried to make some political capital out of that, as if you know, because the government's the funder, somehow it's more responsible than the private sector might be in a similar situation. But I do think there's an opportunity for government that isn't necessarily available to the private sector, and that is an idea put forward to me by a man by the name of Mike Bell, who is Sydney-based. He wrote to both me and the Attorney-General, and I've since written to the Finance Minister, who's put forward this idea of, rather than paying the prime contractors in a build, let's say it's a school or it may be a significant residential accommodation facility on a defence base, for example, rather than pay the primes, part of the money goes into a scrap. It goes into trust to ensure that the contractors under the prime contractor are eventually paid. And I think it's a good idea, and I've written to the Finance Minister and said so. And again, I appeal to her and other senior economic ministers to have a look at the merits of the system as a means of protecting small to medium businesses who might be working under very, very big prime contractors and are vulnerable to the collapse and consequences of the collapse of larger contractors. I want to quickly say, Mr Deputy Speaker, that I am again concerned about the behaviour of some of the Australian Rail Track Corporation's agents in the build of the third rail line through the Hunter down to the port of Newcastle. This is going to be a dedicated line, making the transport of our coal to port quicker and more efficient, and of course further enhancing the capacity. But of course these works, which I welcome so much, involve land acquisitions and other problems for residents nearby. I just experienced another one recently where an overpass is going to affect the access to a person's land. I've written to the Minister about it. I'm hoping it will be resolved, but I just warned the agents of the ARTC, that is those contracting to the ARTC, that I expect, and I'm sure my constituents expect them to act as the equivalent of model litigants in these cases, and treat people with respect and ensure that they get compensation which is commensurate with the way they've been impacted upon as a result of the build of that rail line. I want to close, Mr Deputy Speaker, by doing what I so often do, and that is to welcome the ongoing funding in the budget for the Hunter Expressway. This is a $1.7 billion project in my electorate, which is going to transform land transport in the valley. I've been fighting for it, would you believe, since about Easter of 1988. Some people might describe me as a failure for taking so long, but we got there, Mr Deputy Speaker, and as I said, it's going to be a big boost to the Hunters' economy. But I want to put the RTA on notice that I intend talking to it sometime very soon about some additional works associated with the project, simple things like artworks along the highway, proper signage which points out and highlights the attractions of the valley. And I think that people are going to need a bit of a push. I'm appreciative of a local member of the Chamber of Commerce who came up with some very good ideas, which I'll be putting to the Minister in that regard.
Member's time has expired.